That's very common. I don't take 5 people on my moped, so don't worry. I have one, but I don't take 5 people. It's dangerous. And I also wear a helmet, if that makes you feel better. Down here, we have part of our YDC school, which is our Youth Development Center, and we get to run fun programs, and that was part of the programs. And up here, I can show you that I have friends from all around Cambodia. We got together for this big conference, and yeah, they're friends that I've met, and we get to rekindle every time we have a big youth conference with our Youth with a Mission ministry. So you can go to the next slide. All right, so yes, our cafe, it is completely built. When I went back after a month and a half, it was built. They had the machine. They were like, we're ready. And I was like, am I ready? Like, I was just thinking, what am I supposed to be doing here? What is my ministry? But they were like, you need to start training people. You got to get going. Like, we are opening this cafe in 2 months, and you have no choice. Get going. And so I was like, well, great, this is what I came for. The cafe is built, I will serve. And so here I get the opportunity to show you guys first the cafe that I've always dreamed that I would have in Cambodia for the past 7 years. So this is a 7-year God plan, and now it's come to fruition. And I'm very proud of it. So up here we have our cafe. It is called our Gomprea Cafe, which means child of God. So it is not in the Khmer writing. It is in English writing, but they can still read it because they use English letter once in a while. But whenever someone comes in, they get to know that our identity there at the base is we are children of God. So they also get to step into the atmosphere of they are a child of God as well. None of us are not children of God. I can't speak English anymore. I've learned too much of their language. But yeah, just forgive me on that one. But yes, we have the cafe, and then another one of our themes, there's a bright neon sign that says Chabadam Diamui Clue 9, which means it starts with you. So we want to build into the Khmer that all of their decisions, especially these young people, their decisions, everything, all their changes can start with them. They just have to step forward and claim that identity. So we want to speak into their lives that they are children of God and that everything starts with them. So those are big points for the cafe. And I can tell you the cafe is thriving and surviving. We have earned beyond anything that we had to pay off, and we are now earning income. So within 1 year, the cafe is surviving and doing amazing. So you guys have funded an amazing ministry because now I'm going to show you a little bit. Don't move yet, Clara. So I'm going to show you some of my cafe staff, the people I get to work with. So this is Sacombe. She is the manager currently of the coffee shop, who I got to train up in the past year. So I've been training her for 1 whole year, and now she is in charge of the cafe, which is so big because to have a Cambodian in charge of a cafe this big, honestly, because like I said, we're busy. She handles all the finances. She handles all of the ordering. She handles any technical issues that happen. She goes and finds the right people to fix them. So she handles every big aspect about this. So she learned sustainable, manageable opportunities here that she can take outside of this to be able not to go back to her family's rice farm and live on a rice farm working there. Now she can go work in a cafe, earn really good income, get even stocks from those cafes. She was trained by an American, so people will look at that as, you can work for us no matter what. We don't care. And she speaks English. Through the cafe, she learned all this, and now she can move on and get a really good job and not go back to her abusive family. So that's huge. And then we have more cafe staff. They aren't managers yet, but we're hoping to train them up into that. So they're getting trained right now. We have 4 girls and even more. There's so many of the Khmer that come to me. If you ever hear me say Khmer, that means a Cambodian person. They come up to me and they're like, I want to know what they know. They are learning so many things. They have good skills. They know how to manage a company. I want to be able to serve with you so I can go get a job in that ministry outside of even YWAM, which is really great because they're seeing the benefit of knowing how to run a business and manage it well. So yeah, that's really cool. And then as you could see, we train them up even if we don't speak the same language. So the guy right here, he was training her how to clean the machine because I had to go teach my English class. And she didn't speak any English. He didn't speak any of their language, which is Khmer. And so they used hand gestures. And then we got a translator who we have trained up into being a translator. She knew no Khmer, she didn't know how to read and write Khmer, and she didn't know how to speak English, but now she knows English so well through our base that she can be a translator. So, and that's all within 1.5 years that she's able to do this now. Okay, so you can move on to the next one. Oh, before you move on to that next one, Sacombe actually is going to be the new manager, and I will be co-manager from here on out. So when I go back, I will be stepping down under her leadership, but I'm there for help, but she will be training everyone. She is in charge now. So 1 year of experience, and now she is in charge. So I'm really happy to say that because it releases me from my position, but I did exactly what I went to do, is champion the Khmer to be able to hold their own and maintain sustainable management. Okay, go ahead. So Youth Development Center, the YDC class. This is my English program. And last year, I was doing this online. So we were teaching, I had about 4,000 students on my online program. So I was communicating with 4,000 Cambodian people or even Vietnamese, Japanese. Anyone could join. It was free. All of our videos were online. I taught level 8 English. We had 1 through 12. I only taught level 8, but I had 4,000 students. So can you imagine the 10,000 students that level 1 had to do? I cannot, because level 8 was already difficult. But yes, I am not an English teacher. I don't love it. I tell my mom I will not be a teacher in the future. I don't have the patience for it. But somehow, this is my favorite part of my day. So that says a lot, but I could go on forever about this class. You can't really see this picture super well. It is dark, but these are some of my girls that I am currently discipling, not just teaching. There's about 5 girls in there, and actually there's 6, and they're my heart piece. I was like having anxiety when I was leaving. I was like, what if they fail? What if they don't get to move on? Because if they fail their final test, they don't get to move on. Because we like to have a prestigious school that they can actually work for as well. We're not just going to let them pass other people who want to be in the school. But I love them so much that I'm like, wow, what if I don't get to see them the next quarter because they're with another teacher, so I won't get to see them graduate. They graduate the day I go back to Poi Bet, and I won't get to join because I'll come in at night. But this is me teaching. I have a class of 25 students. And sometimes it overflows and they give me 30 students, and then we have to sit students at the edge of tables, which isn't as professional, but we love it because the more students that we have, it means that they see us as valuable. We are English speakers who can teach them our accent. So, yes, I enjoy it a lot, and this was the day that they got to find out their score results, if they passed the class or not. And so you see them running in. It means so much to them that you see them running in, looking at the door, trying to find their name. Did I pass? Did I fail? So it's a big deal for them. If they pass, they get to move on to the next level, and they can put that on their resumes that I passed this level of English. So if they're able to pass, I started with level 4, now we're on level 8. If they pass all 12 of the levels, they can put that on a resume in the future. And they'll also have an accent from a foreigner, and they can get almost any job within government position, within any food industry position. They can get almost any job because they have good English. So we're creating that position, but at the same time, what we like to do with our Youth Development Center is we share Jesus, obviously. But what I do, I don't directly always be like, Jesus, 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 because we also have to follow a lesson plan, otherwise they're not going to learn English. But what I do is I have lots of students that are currently questioning their sexual identity, and that is a common theme here too. It's a common thing worldwide. But there it's the next cool thing. Kind of like suicide and depression was the cool thing right when I got there, but now it's being sexually confused. And so basically some of the girls, they come up to me and they're like, I really like you. I think I'm going to marry you someday. And I'm like, well, first of all, you're 12. That's illegal. But second, I like to tell them that, hey, I believe in marriage is going to be a man and a woman, and I will marry a man. And that is my belief, and I believe in Jesus. And you just go down a rabbit trail, and they have so many questions. because they're like, all we've heard is that you get to choose who you love in the sense of it's okay if I just choose anybody. But I'm like, here is where my identity lays. I get to speak that into you. And we actually, a big praise the Lord, is I have a student currently. His name is Mesa. He is confused right now about where he's going to go on that choice. But before I left, he started asking me more questions about God. A lot of questions. I would stay up until about 9 p.m. Class gets done at 6 p.m. I would stay up at till 9 p.m. just talking to him. And he speaks pretty good English, but sometimes I direct him to a Khmer who can speak his language so they can answer the deeper questions. But he actually has started going to church. And he started going to church. What's even cooler is we have some people who left that lifestyle of being gay. They left that lifestyle, left it behind. They don't want it anymore, and they're working with us. And he's going with one of them to church, and so he gets to speak into his life about how God changed him. The American gets to speak into this kid's life. God changed me, and I'm very happy about it. And he gets to take him to church, and when I go back, I get to take him to church. So we have students asking questions about God. And I have lots of students that come up to me just talking to me about how they feel like their parents don't love them, and they're like, I never want to go home. I want to stay here forever. Everyone treats me awful in my family, but here I feel loved. And I always have to speak into their lives that, like, we do want them to go to school and everything. I can't have them there all the time, otherwise we'll get in trouble as well. But I have that opportunity to speak into them, like, hey, I have Jesus. I used to feel not good about my life. I used to be depressed, and I am released from that. So, and it's because of Jesus. And I very boldly say that. I don't hold back because that's something I'm proud of, and they can see that. So I get to share a lot with my youth development center, and a lot of them are teenagers. So I have ages 9 through 24 in that class, and they are very impressionable. So we're there to speak life into them, speak Jesus into their lives. Yeah, so that is my youth development center and my update on that. But like I said, they are my heart. And honestly, I wake up every day excited to teach this class. Like, if nothing else makes me excited, it is this. I'm always excited to go back and teach them. I don't love the teaching part, but I'm excited to see them. So I will keep teaching so I can keep being in their lives. Okay, you can move on to that next slide. So I'm going to show you guys some fun stuff about Cambodia as well. So this first picture here is, a lot of you ask me, what is Cambodia like? And I really can't explain it because I've lived in it, so it feels like normal life to me. So I forget what's weird to you guys. And then I look through my pictures and I'm like, oh, it's weird that I drive my moto through flooded streets. And so this is very common. Currently, it's rainy season. This is not much water right now. So this is a road that we have to take to get to our grocery store every day, if you can see it. We take it every single day. I have to take it to go get milk for the cafe. And I have to wear leggings because I have to dress like this when I'm there. But I have to wear leggings that go up to here. Otherwise, when you put your feet down, you are soaking your pants in sewage water because their sewage goes outside their house. It just like lines their house and their open sewage pipes. And there's probably fish guts because of the fish market. And people get a crack out of the fact that I have had crabs crawl up my legs before in the fish market because the crabs get away and then they just start crawling up your leg when you have to put your leg down in the water. That is quite common. It's not weird to me, so when I say it, I'm like, meh. But yes, it's very normal for rainy season because the plumbing is very bad. I can say it because we're in America, but it's very corrupt. The government is corrupt the way they do things. So they kind of just fix the piping system, but then let it break again. So then they have to fix it again. And they just keep doing that, and that's what we're left with. So this happens every year. Some people lose their homes. There are crocodiles that swim around in some parts of the area. A lot of orphanages get flooded, but they always have backup. Like, it's normal for them. So like, oh, our house is flooded. We have crocodiles in here again. Got to move to our second place. So it's very common, not weird. Another fun thing is I am one of the event hostesses. So every time we have an event, like Christmas or Thanksgiving, because we like introducing the Kamai to some of our fun things in life that we do here. Christmas they don't celebrate there because it's a Christian holiday. This is a Buddhist nation, so they celebrate Buddhist holidays. But I got to organize Christmas for them, and all of the Kamai girls and boys were like, I love Christmas. And so we did. We decorated the place. I couldn't find a picture. I have lots of videos. But we decorated the place. We made homemade food. I made homemade stuffing for the first time, and it turned out great. But yeah, it was amazing. And we had 2 teams, so we had about 30 extra Americans on base, and then we invite people from the community as well. So we get to use our cafe to host those events as well. So this is also a thing. But yeah, any holiday, I get to organize. I found out I love party planning. And then some of you did see on Facebook, if you're following my page on Facebook, if you're not, feel free to join or feel free to let me know and I can add you onto that Facebook page. I post updates. But this lady right here is near and dear to my heart. She comes by every day with her snacks on her head and yells out, I've got snacks, ahasamrang, which means snacks. And she will like look through the windows because she knows I'm waiting. And she's just got little donuts or little like potato coconut cakes, which sounds weird, but it's so good. And I run out and I ask her how her day is, and I never realized like what that was doing. But she's like, I wait for you, and I never wait for anyone else because you're the only one who asks me how my day is going. And so just asking her, how are you? How are you doing today? Has made her look forward to coming to us when I was looking forward to her coming to us. So I asked her if I could take a picture with her because I posted about her a while back. And she is still coming by, and she's like, yes, I want to take a picture with you, please. I want you to show it to everyone. I love you guys. So I took a picture. This is her face. Normally she wears a full face mask because they don't want the sun to hit them, and she's walking all day with her snacks unless she sells them all. And usually she sells them all around us because I bring all my friends. I'm like, oh, foreigners, come here, which foreigners are white people or anybody not from Cambodia. I'm like, come here. She has the best Khmer snacks ever, the best Cambodian snacks. And then we all buy them. So she can quit her day for the rest of the day because she sold all the snacks. But yes, these are just some fun extra things. But right now in Cambodia, they are still an unreached people group. So it is still needed that missionaries go there. So if you guys ever want to come visit and then you feel the want to stay, I have a room for you ready and available if you want to stay for a bit. It'd be a fun trip. But you guys, this base is doing so much for the Khmer. It is a big deal for us to give them good jobs in the future so they can get out of their abusive households. Most of their parents, their dads beat them, or they've seen their dads beat their wives. And the boys have seen that, so they thought that was normal. So they come here to this base and they see what is normal, what should be normal, how the men treat their wives with respect, how the men treat the women with respect, and then the girls see what a normal, healthy relationship could look like. And so it just within that, we've already changed their futures. And within getting attainable, retainable skills, we've changed their futures because now they can stay out of that unsafe environment for the rest of their lives. And they can be earning good income. They can live free of what the cultural normal is. And that's what we're hoping to do, is get them out of living hand to mouth, which is earning only the amount of money to pay for your meals that day, but looking to the future with finances. So that is our hope with the base right now, and it is working, and we are definitely seeing Jesus move within this as well, within our students, within our GP Kids School, which is our Gomprea Kids School. We teach about 45 little kids for free, and the cafe funds getting all of their uniforms, all of their textbooks. The cafe funds that now because we can. Because within a year, we have earned enough to be able to pay off anything we owed, and now we can fund everything for 45 kids to get education where they couldn't get free education before. So a lot of people have tried bribing us and saying, can you get my kid into your school and I'll give you $2 million, which these are the rich people, but it's because foreigners are teaching them and we're giving them good, proper education, and they even get to learn about the Bible in this school. And we prioritize that as one of their whole half-an-hour classes. So God is moving in Cambodia, even just within the base, but we see it all around Cambodia. We've been seeing big movements, and we have heard a lot about people coming to Christ lately. So I think there is going to be a big revival at some point within Cambodia, and you guys are a part of it as well. As my church body, you guys are a part of it. So be excited about that. Be excited about what's going on in Cambodia, because it's not stopping, and it's not going to slow down. It's only going to speed up. That's all I have for today.
Thank you so much for sharing, Hannah. That's awesome to get that update. It's awesome to hear about how God is moving and how God is using not just somebody from this church, but using this church body. Through the support that we are giving Hannah, through the support that we are giving, we are making, in small part, we are making what you just saw possible. It's not just us, but we are being used as part of what God is doing. God is not a God of Americans. He is a God of all. He is the God of all on the earth. He is the God of every nation. He is the God of every person. So we need to ensure that God is being preached all over the world. That was the Great Commission that was given to us. It was not just to go to your families. It was not just to go to your nation. It was not just to go to the people that look like you. It was to go into all the world and make disciples. For some of us, it's going to be very local. For some of us, it is going to be, you're going to stay where you are, and you're going to minister to people that look like you and minister to people that are related to you or whatever. But there are some that God has called to the far reaches of the world, and Hannah is one of those. And I just want to take a second and thank her for being willing to do what God has called her to do. I know that there are times that it is uncomfortable. I know that there are times where it's difficult. But following the calling that God has on any of our lives is going to be difficult. It's not always going to look the same for each one of us. God has not called each and every one of us to a foreign nation. But God's calling on your life is going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make you step outside of what's normal for you, what's usual for you. And we have to be willing to be made uncomfortable, to serve the purposes that God has for us, to be the people that God has called us to be. So again, thank you all of you for your support of Hannah, and thank you, Hannah, for being willing to go. So again, today's going to look a little different. For those of you who don't know, my family and I are just getting back from the national conference for Open Bible. So I didn't really have time to prep a sermon this week, but I've decided to bring back what we learned about at convention, what was poured into us, and what Open Bible is doing at a national level. To get some of the boring business stuff out of the way first, and then I can talk about what the words that were spoken over us. One of the big things that happened at National this year was our current president, Randall Bach of Open Bible Churches, his term is coming to an end, and he did not seek re-election, so we elected a new president of Open Bible Churches. There were two candidates, Joshua Grimes and Michael Nortoon. The Open Bible ministers seemingly overwhelmingly elected Michael Nortoon to be the next president of Open Bible Churches. Many of you probably won't know who he is. He's from California. I actually got to know him during my time in California. I know him. I know his kids. He has been a pastor for a long time in Concord. His kids were born in Iowa. He's been bouncing all over the place. He's been in Central Region. He's been in Mountain Plains. He spent a long time in Colorado. But he planted a church in Concord, and in a relatively short period of time, that church has grown from nothing to having a large, thriving school. It is a large church. It's amazing what God has done through him and in that area in a relatively short period of time. He has great vision for the future, And he has a great heart to see young leaders raised up in open Bible churches. In fact, before he was elected president, he was put in charge of their young adults ministry at a national level so that he could spearhead making sure that young people are brought into leadership in open Bible, that they are trained up to be disciples of God. So now we get to see that hopefully implemented on a greater scale with him stepping into the role as president. I'm very excited about Michael taking this leadership role. Like I said, I know him, I know his kids. As an interesting kind of side note, a little plug for youth camp coming up. His son, Levi Nortoon, is actually going to be the speaker at camp this year in Central Region. I know Levi personally. I got to spend quite a bit of time talking to him at National. He's an excellent guy. You youth are in for quite a treat with Levi speaking. So that's a totally separate thing, but little plug for camp. I know the speaker. He's awesome. Then there was a lot of, again, it's keeping in the business side of things. There was some updates to the bylaws that were made at the national level. Most of these were just cleaning up little things that were just old and needed to be brought up to speed, allowing for electronic meetings when necessary. They kind of ran into this problem during COVID. They had to go online, and they weren't really sure that they had the ability to go online, so they amended their bylaws so they could in the future if the need ever arises. But they also made a lot of changes to their official statements. Now, to give you an idea of what official statements are, it's things that aren't bylaws, but it's stating what Open Bible's position is on certain issues. They've had many of these statements going back decades, but they felt that the world is changing, the culture is changing, and as such, we needed to update our official statements. Some of these were on things like substance abuse. Some of these were on things like abortion and sexual identity. I'd like to say that I am proud of Open Bible churches because in all of these updates to official statements, they've gone to great lengths to make clear that we stand on biblical principles, we stand on biblical truth when it comes to all of these things. They reaffirmed in stronger language than they did before that they believe that abortion is wrong, it's a sin. They reaffirmed and were clear that biblical sexual identity is what is proper. I know it's coming, sexual identity is a big thing in the world right now, especially in America, where you can identify as whatever you want, you can change and be whatever you want. But Open Bible has made sure that they were completely clear that God has made you man and woman, and that is it. So they updated a lot of these things to make sure that we stand on biblical principles and there is no confusion as to where this church stands. I know there are many other churches and many other denominations that are struggling with this subject right now. But I can say I was in the room when these official statements were presented to the pastors and they were voted on. And all of these that hold to biblical truth and hold to biblical standards strongly were overwhelmingly passed by the pastors of Open Bible churches. So I'm proud of this denomination and the stand that we have taken to say, we stand on biblical truth. We stand on what God says. It does not matter what the world is doing. It does not matter what the world believes. We stand on the truth of the word. So I wanted to bring that report to you and say, the world may feel like it's going crazy, but this church has said that we are going to stand on the truth of the word. We are going to stand on what God has said. And then we got to actually be poured into as pastors, and we got to be spoken to. And on the first night, a pastor shared with us, and he said, we're coming out of a time of great difficulty with COVID and everything else that's happened. And the theme of this conference was refresh, was to a fresh outpouring of the Spirit. And he says that many of us feel like in these last several years that we have gone through hard and trying times. We've gone through, it feels like we've been trekking through a desert. It feels like we've been lost in the wilderness, much like the Israelites were when they wandered in the desert in the wilderness for 40 years before they came into the promised land. He shared a scary statistic that in the last 3 years, more pastors have left the ministry than in any other 3-year period in our denomination's history. That is how trying this time has been for pastors in particular, for people in the church. It has been a difficult and trying time. But he wanted to give us encouragement and say, yes, the Israelites may have been wandering in the desert, but during that time, God was providing for them. There are going to be many times in your life where you feel like you're wandering in the wilderness, where you feel like you're in the desert, where things are just beating down on you and weighing down on you, and you feel like you're going to be crushed under the weight of everything that's happening. But God is still providing for you. Throughout all those 40 years in the desert when the Israelites were wandering, every day manna appeared for them. They were fed by God in a supernatural way. And not only that, but their clothing did not wear out during that time. He says, yes, you may find yourself in the desert. You may find yourself in the wilderness. But in that moment, you will see that God will say, look, your shoes are still strong. The clothes on your back don't have holes. I'm still feeding you. It may be difficult, but I'm still giving you what you need. I am still the God who provides for you. There are many reasons that you may find yourself in those wilderness moments in your life where you feel like you're just lost in the desert. He gave a few examples. Jesus was called into the desert by the Spirit. For him, it was the purpose that he could be tempted by the devil. So sometimes God is calling you in your life into that desert, into a time of great trying. Maybe God is leading you in that direction. And when he does, he will provide for you in the desert. He will provide for you in those difficult times. It may not be easy. It may not be comfortable. He used the example of Jesus. Jesus was very hungry. He went into the desert and he didn't eat for 40 days. But after his task was done, it says that the angels attended to him. God may call you into the desert sometimes, but he will take care of you while you're there. There was also David, who was driven into the wilderness when Saul was after him, because David had been anointed as the next king of Israel, and Saul was jealous and wanted to do away with David, and he was forced into the desert. So maybe you feel like life has pushed you into the desert. Maybe you feel like life is forcing you into these moments of great need and great trial. But while David was in the wilderness, God cared for him. He made sure there was always water provided for him. He made sure there was always food enough for his people to eat. So even if you feel like the enemies around you have forced you into the desert, God will still provide for you. God is still there in the wilderness. Or maybe like Elijah, you fled into the wilderness because you feel like you have nowhere else to go. Elijah, after confronting the prophets of Baal and calling down fire from heaven, then Queen Jezebel says that she's going to come and she's going to take his life. And fear overtakes Elijah and he runs into the wilderness. So maybe you feel like you have no choice but to run into the wilderness. You have no choice but to run and retreat back. But God met Elijah in the wilderness. Once again, he provided for his needs, where birds would deliver food to Elijah. And then he called him up onto the mountain and said, I am going to speak to you here in the desert. I am going to speak to you in the wilderness. And many great things passed by Elijah, but God wasn't in any of them. He wasn't in the fire that came by. He wasn't in the great wind that came by. He wasn't in the earthquake. Instead, he was in that still small voice that spoke into Elijah's ear. And he asked him, what are you doing here? Why have you run? Have I not called you? So sometimes in those moments of wilderness, God is going to speak to you. And he is going to reaffirm what he has called you to do. And he is going to encourage you in those moments. Think about how great our God is, that in those moments in the wilderness when all other things seem like they're coming crashing down and it seems like your death is imminent, yet somehow miraculously God provides exactly what you need. When the Israelites wandered in the desert, God called forth water out of stone. When they thought that they would all die from thirst, he called water where there was none before. He brought forth food out of nothing. You may feel like everything's falling apart. You may feel like the world has gone crazy. You may feel like you're wandering in the wilderness. But that's okay because God provides for you in the wilderness. God gives you what you need. And what was the difference with all of them? When they came out of the wilderness, God called them into something even greater than what they had before. When the Israelites came out of the wilderness, they took possession of the promised land. When David came out of the wilderness, he became king over Israel. When Elijah came out of the wilderness, he continued his ministry towards turning the people of Israel back to God. And when Jesus came out of the wilderness after being tempted by Satan, he continued his own ministry, which culminated in him going to the cross and defeating sin and defeating death. So if you feel like you're in a wilderness right now, if you feel like you are being beaten down, if you feel like everything is going wrong in your life right now, know that God is going to provide for you and that you're not going to stay in the wilderness forever. And when he has called you out of that wilderness, great things lie ahead of you. His purposes lie ahead of you. It may feel like 40 years that you're going to spend in the wilderness like the Israelites, or 40 days like Jesus did. But the truth is, none of those people stayed in the wilderness, and neither will you. Neither will any of us. On another day, part of being refreshed was we were told the importance of prayer. And a rather scary statistic was shared with me during this lesson on the importance of prayer and its part in our life of being refreshed and being led towards God. They said that there was a survey taken of people who were in the church, and they were asked how often they prayed. The options were every day, once a week, once a month, and out of all of those, they said these are all people in the church. Roughly 60% said that they prayed every day. Now that might sound like a lot, but if you are calling yourself a child of God and you are not praying daily, you need to reconsider your prayer life. God is the source of everything that we hold dear. He is the source of our strength and our ability to keep going. And if you are not tapping into that source on a daily basis, you need to start. And then about 15% said that they prayed once a week. And about another 15-ish% said they prayed once a month. But the scariest part was that there were 9% of the responders to the survey who didn't know how to answer the question, because they didn't know what it meant to pray. And these were people in the church. They didn't understand what it meant to pray. And they were saying, they were speaking to pastors, and they said, part of this is on us because we are not doing a good enough job teaching our people what it means to pray and how important it is to pray. Prayer is our lifeline to God. It is our direct line with the Father through which he is able to speak into our lives. And not just speak into our life, but pour his power into our life so that we may be changed. Over the last several weeks in our study in the book of Romans, we have been talking about transforming our lives to look more like what God has called us to be. The power behind that transformation is prayer. If you are not in communion with God, how do you expect God to change your life? It's impossible if you are not in communion with him. So then we were given the example of the disciples in the upper room after Jesus had been crucified. And he had gone back up to heaven, and he said, "Go and wait, and power will come on you." So they went into the upper room in Jerusalem, and there were 3 parts that we were taught. There were 3 important parts of what they did. The first part was they sought God. It was seeking him. It says they went into that upper room and they began to pray and seek the will of God. In each of these, we're talking about prayer, and we're talking about how we are to access the power that God gives to us. There is intentionality in all of this. We have to be intentionally seeking God. We have to intentionally seek his will in our life. We have to seek his power. Too often, I think when we pray, we just talk to God, and we never seek his will. We don't seek him. Seeking means I'm looking for something. Too often, I think when we pray, we expect God to just come to us, and we don't go looking for him. Be intentional in your prayer life. Look for God. Because the Bible tells us that those who seek him, as surely as the sun rises in the morning, you will find him. But if you don't seek him, how are you going to find something that you're not looking for? Be intentional in your prayer life. Seek the will of God. Seek the power of God in your life, because if you aren't looking for it, you won't find it. And don't be surprised when you don't find it if you're not looking for it. The second part was that they needed to soak. They needed to soak up the power of God in their life. As they were seeking, then the power of God, the Spirit of God was poured out in that room. And it formed over their heads like tongues of fire, and they began to speak in tongues. The power of God, the Holy Spirit, was poured out in that room. And they began to soak up that outpouring into their lives. You have to be intentional about opening your heart to God, opening yourself to God, so that when you seek him and when you find that power that he has promised, when you find his will in your life, you have to absorb that into yourself. You have to draw that in, soak it up like a sponge. What good is a sponge if you don't soak up the water, if you don't soak up the soap and allow it to serve its purpose? The same thing is, if you seek the power of God and you look for it and you try to find it, and then you stop short of drawing it into your life, what purpose was there in the seeking? You have to draw in what you find. You have to bring it into your heart and allow it to soak and permeate into every part of who you are. Because then it will begin to change you. This is when that transformation starts to happen. During this process of you soaking up and drawing in everything that God is revealing to you, this is when he will start to give you visions and plans for the future, and he will reveal his plan for you and in your life. And he will start giving you the power and the vigor to do these things, the desire to see them done in your life. But it doesn't stop there. Because this third step to prayer-powered life is to then saturate. The outpouring of God's Spirit on the day of Pentecost in that upper room didn't stop in the upper room. In fact, I wish I could take credit for this quote, but I can't. Because this is a direct quote from the man who was teaching us this lesson. He said the outpouring of the Spirit didn't happen in the upper room so that it could stay in the upper room. The outpouring in the upper room happened so that it could pour out into the streets. Because what happened after the outpouring of the Spirit? What happened after the Spirit of God filled the disciples? They went out, and Peter gave the very first come to Jesus sermon. He began to speak to the people in the streets and call them to repentance and call them into relationship with God. And on that day, 3,000 were added to the members of the church because there were so many flooding the streets of Jerusalem. And God used that moment to not just pour out his Spirit onto his followers, but to then empower them and encourage them to then pour out into those in the streets so that they could then saturate the world around them in the power and the presence of God. But it all began with prayer. It all began with seeking God. If they did not seek God, then they would not have found him. If they did not seek him, they would not have had the opportunity to soak up his word and soak up his power. And if they had not sought him, then they would not have the power to soak up, and then they wouldn't have had that ability to then go and saturate the world. That was the beginning of God's church. That was the beginning of Jesus' church on this earth. And it began through the power of prayer. And yet too often we discount the power of prayer. Even in God's church, as those statistics showed, where 9% of people didn't even know how to answer the question because they didn't understand what it meant to pray. When we don't understand what it means to pray, we cut ourselves off from that kind of power. When we only pray once a month, we are limiting our supply of godly power in our life. When we only pray once a week at church, we are limiting the power of God in our life. We are called to pray without ceasing. Now, does that mean that we are to spend every second of every day constantly in prayer towards God? I don't believe that that's what it means. We have our lives to live. But it means that we should be constantly lifting up our desires to God. We should be constantly seeking his will in our life. If a day goes by where you have not sought the presence of God, you're doing it wrong. If a day goes by where you're not speaking to God the Father, you're doing it wrong. I'm not trying to be offensive to you. I'm not trying to be accusatory. I'm not trying to be mean to anybody. I'm telling you the truth. If you cut yourself off from prayer, you are cutting yourself off from the power of God in your life. Because that is how he speaks to us. That is how he pours his power into us. So don't discount the power of prayer. And when it comes to moments where you feel like you need the refreshing of God in your life, when you feel those moments where you've been in the wilderness and you're just dry and you feel like you're so cut off from God, that is how you find him again. That is how you are filled up again. It's through prayer. So don't discount the power of prayer in your life. And if you don't understand what it means to pray, come and talk to me. And I will walk you through it. In its simplest terms, prayer is conversation with God. It's seeking him. There's more to it. So like I said, if you don't understand what it means to pray, if you would find yourself in that 9% of people who don't even know how to answer that question, don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. Come and talk to me. I promise I'm not going to look down on you. I'm not going to think any less of you. I would rather you come and admit that you don't know what it means to pray than to go the rest of your life not knowing what it means to pray, not knowing how to access the power of God in your life. And if you're one of those people that says, well, yeah, I pray, but maybe only once a month or once a week, I would urge you and I would challenge you, at least for this next week, spend time with God in prayer every day. Even if it's only a little, but start building that habit. Start building that connection between you and God. because that's where his power comes from. We also heard from our outgoing president, Randall Bach, and he shared a bit from his life. A lot of it was testimonial stuff, so I won't get into that. But the main lesson that he wanted to leave with was, he said the story of his life, he felt like God was thrusting him into positions that he was not qualified for. He talked about how he eventually became president of Open Bible Churches, and he never pastored a church. And he said he felt that that was ridiculous and ludicrous. How could God call him to be over pastors when he had never pastored himself? So he said that often he would, because of his embarrassment, he would deflect with humor when people would ask him what he did for a living. And he would say, oh, well, I'm involved in Open Bible Churches. And he'd talk about what he was doing. And they'd say, oh, well, where have you pastored? And he would always try to change the subject or make a joke or make light of it and say, oh, well, they just needed somebody and I happened to be walking by the door and they said, why not that guy? And he said that finally God convicted him. And God said, every time you diminish your position, every time you diminish what God is what I am doing in your life, you are diminishing me. You are making light of me. Have I not called you to where you have been? You may not feel qualified, but I am the one who qualifies you. And that same thing holds true for each and every one of us. God may be calling you to something. God may be laying something on your heart that you don't feel qualified for, that you don't feel like you are equipped to do. But don't diminish the calling of God on your life. Don't diminish what he's doing with you. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. You may not feel like you have everything in you that you need to accomplish what God is calling you to, but start taking those steps of faith. And I promise you, God is going to meet you along the way. I promise you, God is going to provide you with everything you need. Because God has not called you into his will. God has not called you to take a step if he has not already made provision for those steps. You may not see that provision. You may not think yourself able. But God would not call you unless he already knew that you could succeed. If he did not already know that you could accomplish what he has called you to accomplish. This resonated with me in particular. I've shared a bit about my background, but before coming here, the thought of being a lead pastor, a senior pastor, was scary to me. I didn't feel qualified. I didn't feel able. I was looking for youth positions and associate positions, something that was more comfortable for me, something that I felt like I could do. But it became clear that God was calling me into something different. And I struggled with those doubts myself. I struggled with those feelings of inadequacy, just like our president shared. But I know that God has met me along the way. I know that God has provided everything that I need. So if God has put on your heart for you to take a step, a big step, into something that feels uncomfortable, don't be afraid to take that step. Don't be afraid to be who God has called you to be. Because he has already provided everything you need to do it. Don't diminish what he does, what he's doing in your life, or what he wants to do in your life. He is the God of everything. If he can use someone like me to lead a church, he can use anyone to do anything. Because trust me, there's nothing special about me. But there's plenty special about the God that we serve. And through him, we can do all kinds of things. So seek God. Seek him through prayer. Be built up and refreshed by him. If you're walking through a time in the wilderness, that's okay. God's going to provide for you in the wilderness. And when he calls you out, there will be great things in the future. But when God calls you to those great things, don't be afraid to take those steps, because he has qualified you. He has equipped you. You may not see it, but it's there. So that's what we learned at convention. But before we go, I do want to say a quick word to the men, the fathers here. As it is Father's Day, I don't want you guys to feel like we didn't say anything about you guys on Father's Day. So I want you men, fathers, I want you to know how important you are. The purpose that God has given to each and every one of you. We live in a world right now where the very idea of manhood and masculinity is coming under attack. It's being labeled as toxic. The way God has created you is not toxic. The way God has created you is not bad or evil. God created you to be protectors and providers. Don't feel guilty about being those things. Don't feel guilty about your desire for husbands to protect your wives. That doesn't mean that your wives are lesser. It is the way that God created you. Don't be afraid to be leaders in your home. That is who God has called you to be. It's very clear, the statistics show, when just the mother comes to know Christ, very rarely will you get the kids. Sometimes you'll get the kids. But when the father comes to know Christ and takes his relationship with God seriously, I believe it's around 80% of the time, the entire family comes to know God. That shows the importance that you have, the impact that you have in your family's life. Media and entertainment and everything likes to portray men now as kind of the bumbling fool, the Homer Simpsons of the world. I'm not a fan of The Simpsons. I don't watch it, but I could see how they portray him, and that's become the common trope for men. They portray us as just this bumbling oaf, this idiot who should just be quiet and sit in the corner. That is not how God sees you. That is not who God has called you to be. He has not called you to be quiet in the corner. He has not called you to be some secondary part of your household. He has not called you to be more like your wife. He has called you to be the man that he has called you to be. Walk in the masculinity that he has given you. Walk in the responsibilities that God has given to you. God created male and female on purpose because we have our own roles. We have our own responsibilities. And the part that you give to your family will not be found anywhere else. The stability that you bring to your family will not come from anywhere else. Be the spiritual leader of your household. That is who you are called to be. Teach your children all you have learned in God. Encourage them to be who God has called them to be. I try to take this into account when I speak to my own children, even though they're young. I want to speak life into them. I want to speak encouragement to them. Every time you do, you build them up. Your words have meaning. I know it may seem silly, but I tell my daughters all the time, even though they're young, I tell them how pretty they are. I tell them how much I love them. Because if I don't give them that love and that affirmation, eventually they're going to grow up a little bit and they're going to go and look for it somewhere else, anywhere else. Too many young women out there are seeking that love and that affirmation that their fathers never gave them. Don't be afraid or embarrassed to show your love to your children. They crave it. They crave your adoration. They crave your attention. They crave your love. So don't hold it back just because it makes you feel awkward. Show your children you love them. Show your wife that you love her. Because that helps build up and encourage your entire household. God has created you to lead. I was in youth ministry for a long time, and one thing that I would tell each and every one of those young men that came through our youth ministry was, congratulations, you were born a leader because you were born a man. There's responsibility that comes with that, yes, and privilege that comes with that. There's great honor that comes with that. You have been born a leader, so lead. Lead your house. Lead your wife. Lead your children. But make sure you lead them to God. Because if you are being led by God, then you are a leader worth following. So seek God. And then seek to encourage your family to do the same. It is who God has called you to be. And there's nothing toxic about that. The world needs more godly men to stand up and be who God has called them to be, not less. So I wanted to speak that encouragement over each and every one of you. And we had some fun on our way to and from Texas. We got to experience some things. One of the things we got to experience is a place called Buc-ee's. I don't know if you're familiar with Buc-ee's, but it's amazing. So as a show of our appreciation to all of you men, we have some from their world-famous wall of beef jerky. There's beef jerky out there for everybody, and we got some seasonings that they were also selling there. We were just so impressed by the place, we decided to bring home some for all of you. So all of you men, go help yourself. There's a few different flavors out there. First come, first serve. Take what you want. Start out with just one of each, and then if there's leftovers, we can start working on taking home maybe more than one. So yeah, we want to celebrate you guys. We want to give you a little something to show our appreciation for you being the men that God has called you to be. So let's go before God in prayer. Father God, I love you. Lord, I pray that as we celebrate the fathers, the men in our lives today, I pray that we would give them the honor that they deserve, that we would give them the respect that they deserve. And Lord, that you would encourage each one of us men, whether we are fathers or not, to be the leaders that you have called us to be, so that we can lead our families, whether we have families now or we will have families in the future. Lord, I pray that you would encourage us to be who you have called us to be. And Lord, I pray we would seek after you every day, that we would soak up your word, soak up the power that comes from you, and not just hold it in for ourselves, but also pour it out into the world around us, so that we may change the world.